But imagine a community in which there was no superiority and no inferiority. Methinks that people in the world may actually wish to rush into that. It'll be a sociological haven. It's dog eat dog out there. It's nature red in tooth and claw. The church is supposed to provide another way, not an extension of the old way. There's not supposed to be any ecclesiastical peck order, you know. And only the gospel will bring that about. But of course it means that we not only have one good in Jesus Christ, in that the life of Christ is credited to us, but we also have one penalty for our bad. Yep, Jesus Christ has paid the penalty fully for our wrong. Now, if that is the case, we can't judge each other. The only way you can judge another is to declare that the death of Jesus was inadequate. Now, when your Christian brother is being pig-headed, have a good look at it, because that's why Jesus died. Sin is not some airy-fairy substance that floats 6 or 8 clouds above your head. That pig-headedness is why Jesus died. That was the thing that put him on the cross. Do you know, husband, when your wife is pig-headed, do you know when she believes she's right and she's the only one in the neighbourhood who believes it? Even the pet dog knows she's wrong. You know how she insists on being right? Well, take a couple of minutes out to stare right at it and look at it carefully, because that's what put Jesus on the cross. And husbands, do you know that once in every 25 years when we get pig-headed? You know that occasional lapse, so infrequent it's hard to remember what they're like? Well, that's what put Jesus on the cross. Sin is a very down-to-earth, fussless, aggravating entity. But this is the point. Take care, because Jesus paid the penalty for that. If words mean anything, he paid the penalty for that. He bore in his own body on the tree the entire consequences of that wrong. And that means you must not come out and judge another person. Otherwise you're adding to the death of Jesus as much as any person has ever done. And that really gets very close to blasphemy. All right, what do I mean by judging? Well, I can state that for you fairly clearly, I hope. I mean allowing that misbehavior, allowing that aggravating nonsense that you see in your Christian brother and your Christian sister to determine your relationship to them in an adverse way. That is to say, you avoid them. What right have we got to exercise avoidance, casting from our presence, when God has not cast us from his presence because of the blood shed by our Lord Jesus Christ? This is what judging is. Judging is not seeing wrong for what it is and saying, hey, look, honey, that's just sheer pig-headedness you're involved in, dear. Or when she says to you, honey, you're a wretch. It's not saying, well, you mustn't judge. That's not judging. Judging is when you allow the fact to determine your behavior adversely towards that person. You don't talk to them anymore. You hold it against them. You withhold something from them because of it, either help or counsel or whatever it might be. That's judging. So the gospel builds bridges between people and doesn't create barriers. The very thing that it does is removes those barriers, because there'll always be some nickety-pickety little thing that aggravates you about someone else. And methinks that many divorces would not happen, even amongst Christians, yea, even amongst Christians, if the gospel, you see, it's all the time to be related to fullness of the Spirit, if the gospel determined relationship between husband and wife. And when you realize that you were put there by God to help each other overcome those things, in other words, you are instruments in the final salvific plan of God, in working out subjectively what is a glorious reality for us objectively in Jesus Christ. Marriage is a partnership, a salvifically instrumental partnership designed by God to do that, not to bring about great cleavage, not to bring about sort of temporal purgatory. And the second way that the gospel builds bridges between people and doesn't create barriers is that the gospel creates a community of saints, a charismatic community, in which every person in the community has a God-designed role to play in the final salvation of the community. Time slipping away, we don't have time to look at it as much as we'd like to, but you need to keep in mind here 1 Corinthians 12. Every person is gifted by God for the salvation of that community, for the salvation of the people of God. They are instrumental. It is a truly charismatic community, a community that is a gifted community. And this is the point, brothers and sisters, and it's here that the charismatics are trying to shout things to us. That the charismatic community is not a community where one supposedly omnicompetent sacerdotal priest stands up and does everything, and the others just stand back, sort of looking at each other's necks and sort of following suit. That's not a charismatic community at all. And it'd be the greatest helpful factor, I think, to many clergymen for the humblest member of their congregation to minister to them. And for the clergyman to realize that the member of the congregation is designed by God to minister to them. It's a tragic and a terrible thing that the minister comes out of theological seminary believing himself to be omnicompetent, a sort of an ecclesiastical pope, where he has to do everything, and where people can't at all be allowed to see that he is really in need, and he needs the ministry of his parishioners as much as they need his. And it's no wonder that clergy crack up and leave the church, and leave the ministry at least. You need to look at that charismatic passage in 1 Corinthians 12. Every person has a role, a function. We need each other. We are instrumental in each other's salvation. Now, you see, this creates a legitimate sense of being wanted amongst people in the community. Not only is there one good and one death for our bad, one total judgment, but there is a legitimate being wanted, being needed in the community. But when people sit back and watch an omnicompetent sacerdotalist do it all, it's no wonder that they feel that it's not wanted. And I dare say many in the church would have never capitulated to the charismatic movement had they have been shown that they've been wanted and needed and play a strategic and important role in the community years ago. Those who belong to a strongly hierarchical church ought to remember this, that one of the surest ways for a church to start to fall apart is when the leaders of the church lose contact with their people. The schism comes about from the roots up, as it were. You may madly run around, try to keep administrative wheels turning, but unless there is this real give and take, unless there is this real interpersonal communication, then doom is writ large, and it's only a matter of time. I'm just going to give one more characteristic because time slipped away, but it's an important one. A mentally healthy religion is one that promotes a greater enjoyment of life and not a lesser enjoyment of it. A mentally healthy religion is one that creates a greater enjoyment of life and not a lesser enjoyment of it. You only have to read the history of the Christian church to see the bizarre approach to the things of the world that has been expressed in the church. The whole theological doctrine of celibacy, for instance, not based fundamentally on the belief that a man may do more as a single person in the things of God, so much oftentimes as a belief that somehow marital union was evil. Monasticism and such in the church. The flagellation of the human body in such a way as to almost cripple the human creation of God, because somehow or other Plato has intruded into the Church of Christ and taught that the body is evil and needs to be beaten almost to death if spiritual realities are going to be experienced.